So I'm going to go ahead and dive in here. We would expect additional people to join. My name is Sven. I think most people know me here, but this is the Cloud Salon, and we are recording this. So if you don't want to be recorded, just don't turn your video on. Our normal format here is, hey, John, if, sorry, if I need to read the land acknowledgement, I do not have it. Let's see if that attracts him back onto the screen.
That is my mistake. Keep moving without it.
Okay. We just throw these things in for entertainment. And I apologize for not having the land acknowledgement to read. We'll edit it in later. I see some recognition coming in from the chat to our world-renowned guest tonight, Qinzi Tan. And I am super happy and proud to welcome Qinzi to the Cloud Salon. I am really honored to be able to be moderator, but it also allows me to tell silly stories, which at least Qinzi is in a position where she will still laugh at my stories, which is good. But listen, my relationship to Qinzi Tan, who is a graduate. Qinzi, what year did you graduate from MFADT?
2017.
17. So she's been out for a solid 6 years. Okay, Sumi, I love going to the class of 17. However, I met Qinzi long before she entered the program in Beijing at a variety of places, but primarily at a workshop at Tsinghua University there that I was involved in. And I recall after meeting her thinking like, well, if she sat through that workshop, there is absolutely no way she will attend the MFA Design and Technology program, because she's just going to be looking at me going, this guy is just out of his mind. But she apparently got something from it and showed up the next fall, which was great. And the rest is legend. Qinzi was a driven and creative student within the program, has gone on professionally to achieve great success with I'm sure some hurdles along the way. But we've maintained close contact, and we talk a lot about what's going on with her career. And it was just really nice to think about getting her back in here to talk a little bit. So I will step back. I'll hand the platform over to Qinzi. Qinzi, talk for as much as you want, 20, 25 minutes. Our general approach is that then we'll turn things over to questions. Plenty to say before we get to Q&A. So everybody, welcome Qinzi Tan, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for, I always know the introduction from you is going to be phenomenal, but I never imagined it's going to be this long as well. So one fun fact, like the only thing I remember the first time I met with Sven in Beijing was that he paid for the lunch. And perhaps that's the whole reason why I eventually joined DT. And then another fun fact is it's not until 4 to 5 years later that he finally allowed me to buy him a coffee. So that was like the whole story in loop. But anyway, so I'm very glad to be here. And then as mentioned, I graduated in the year of 2017. And later I taught a couple of classes at DT for a couple of semesters. So it's like sorry, I was teaching the BFA game track, like Core Lab Studio for Unity, taught a couple of classes regarding creative coding, open frameworks, and then the AR design. And I'm currently a design lead with Meta Reality Labs. So as Vance mentioned, and then we've been communicating a lot about my career growth and my career journey. And then, so I've tried a lot of like different things in the past 6 years. It's not saying that I'm so successful right now that I'm giving this talk. It's just because I've tried a lot of different things and try to like see how do I apply the things I've been learning. I was learning at DT to the real world sort of like complexity and this kind of scenarios that we kind of feel that it's going to be interesting for me to talk about this. And then we can have like a discussion or like a Q&A after, and then we can see how those kind of things may apply to some of the problems that you're facing right now as students in school. I prepped a short deck that I'm going to do a screen share. Sharing. Okay. I'm right now in presentation mode. Is it all good? Can you all see this? Animation playing, everything good?
All good, Qinzi.
Okay, sound good. So a little bit about me before I dive in. As I know very well about DT is a gigantic program and there are a lot of like directions you could actually choose to approach this program and your future career. So before I dive into like how did I actually explore during the past 6 years, I like to set up the baseline tone. So first one is that because I feel my personal story or like my personal choice, like decision-making thinkings may not apply for everyone. So first of all, I'm a very technical person and I love technology, I love to code. So that's the first one. So a lot of like my career decision-making is based on what I really love and what I really like doing. So I'm in particularly interested in computer graphics, AR technology, and AI. And then as I mentioned, during this past 6 years, I've tried a lot of different things. I've worked at studio, startups, big tech companies in the US and UK right now, and also in China. And then so also like my roles have been varied dramatically, like starting from a creative coder, creative technologist, to prototype engineering, and then product management. And then not until last year, it was actually the first time I'm having the word designer in my official title. So we figured it may be interesting. And then personally speaking, there are 3 kind of problems that I really love to solve. Like the first one is I love to apply technology to create new interactions, like fun interactivity, and then interacting with a machine, with a human being, human body, and also the space around you. And then second one is I'm a very system-driven person. So large scale systems is another thing that I'm interested about. And then the third one is as I do more in the career world, I realize that I really love creating tools that will enable other people to do this. So those are like some couple of like examples of what I've been doing in the past years with different roles. And then so for today, I've breaking down my whole career journey into kind of like 4 stages. And then the first one is really how did I live my life in D12? What did I do on D12? And then what were the struggles back then? And then the second phase is mainly when I was working as a more hands-on in the coding and technology side as creative coder, as prototyper in different companies. And then, so it's pretty much my journey being a new grad in the industry, like all the gaps I've spotted, and then how did I manage to grow as that kind of like new grad to like a more kind of like mature professional in the companies and stuff like that. And the third one is an interesting journey where I came back to China, where I was originally from, and then where I was performed as a product manager and a product lead, where I start to see things from a bigger perspective. And then the fourth part is like where I am right now is like trying to bring the future to consumer level. So starting from my salad days on D12. Okay, so how did my DT life look like? I never really thought about this question until I was putting together this deck. The only thing I remember before was like I did so many things, and I was thinking like what actually makes sense. So as I started like look at like my photo album and try to dig out those photos here, what I realized like there are 4 things I think like stood out. The first one is like I was the kind of person I tried a lot of different things, not conceptual wise, more on the technical side. So like different kind of like tools, technologies, or hardwares, whatever is available in the program, I try to play with it. For example, you can see here is the first generation Google Air glasses I borrowed from Professor David Carroll. And then I didn't do anything with it. I was just charging it and turn it on. But I was just like very interested in trying all different kinds of things. And then the second part is I tend to like try to mix things together. It's like, what if I connect like physical computing to Unity, OSC, and then what if I bring it to website, blah, blah, blah. So what if I try to create a creative coding thing in a very different platform with a different library? So I was like doing that. I wasn't intentionally doing that. I guess it's just a course setup that I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do for my major studio final this year. And then I have so many electives. I think DT is a program that really gave us an environment that there are so many courses you can choose from. And then eventually, how I manage to do things is just like, there are so many things that I've kind of like tried what I can do when I put everything together. It's just like my ways of thinking about the technology and my personality, but that's how I do it. And then I think maybe very similar to a lot of people here, like still in the program today, is that there's like FOMO every day. Every day I found that there's a new technology popping up. Someone else doing this library that I've never seen. And then I felt with like kind of like fear of missing out every day. But however, I was always on default. And then so I could always see like what's happening on the floor, kind of like give me a sense like what's happening in the industry. So that's pretty much my DP life. It's really interesting at this point of time that I started to reflect a little bit for the purpose of today. There are a couple of things I sort of realized. It's not until today that I realized how DP has stood up for my success in the career. And I was sort of like, they're like, first one is that I started to realize a lot of random things, or like, let's say, most of the random things I did on D12 has turned out to be surprisingly relevant for my career today. And then I have a photo here, which is like a class I took, one of the electives. I think it was taught by Professor Jesse Harden. And then it's kind of like reimagine computational photography. I took the class mainly because I found the name, it was like super cool. And then I was there. This photo represents like one day, Jesse was just like bringing this like radio thing, put it at the center and ask every student to turn the laptop around. So we could take a round of photos around this object. And every of us is also like holding a phone up there as a second round. So we took another round of photos of this object. And then we put up like all of those photos into a very broken engineering driven kind of interface tools to kind of like train certain kind of like 3D model using photogrammetry. This is like one of the random things. I didn't know what I'm going to be doing with it. And then around the time when I was about to graduate, I'm like, yeah, this thing absolutely does no good. Like it doesn't do anything for me to help me to find a job. But however, later is like what I realized, I've been using photogrammetry for every of my jobs, like starting from like startups, like to later, like when I was in China. And then like right now I have a photo to show. This is what I'm doing right now at Meta. It's like one of the projects. It's like, we're just using a little bit more camera to do a similar kind of thing. So it's kind of like that. I was like struggle, like how are we going to apply those like unstable early stage technology? And the thing is that technology is going to eventually catch up. And then a lot of things I didn't know that I was doing for any specific purposes, eventually just going to get to a place that, yeah, I've seen this before. I've even tried this before. So I know how this works. And then so I would have that way of thinking about, okay, I know now how to apply this technology to solve a real problem, or what are the challenges I need to tackle, somehow like that. And then the second thing is that I still love to put things together. And I think it's really important to have that prototyper spirit. It's not like how good you are in coding or prototyping. It's just that kind of like motivation, or like the characteristic, the quality of you, that you're not afraid of trying something new. It's just like you need to always try something new. And then that's very important if you continue to work in this kind of like new tech industry. And then also I'm relatively calmer because I deal with like FOMO and default every day. So I kind of know like when there's a new piece of technology, it's normal. It's always going to be like this. So that's pretty much what I'm thinking about when I look back those days. And then, yeah, there are still things that doesn't make much sense. I still don't know why did I build the cabinet that Sven helped me get rid of. And then if I ever figure that part out, I may just come back and let you guys know. Okay. So the second part is really like the early 2 years, I would say, starting from the second year when I was at DP. I tried to like find jobs, like find the gigs I could do in the industry. And then also like the first 2 years, I was like really focusing on cultivating my expertise in the industry. And then there are a lot of like gaps I started to realize between my school projects, or like my skill level when I was at school, versus the industry standard. So those are like some early kind of like work in progress, kind of like photos, what I did when I was working on those early stage products. So there are like 4 things I think kind of like stood out for me when I was a new grad that I found really challenging and struggling for me. Like the first one, what I noticed is like the polish, like the quality of the, like, let's see, how complete the work is, how polished it is. Do we really consider this as something that with business value, that it makes sense for it to work in the company or like studio or like agency? And then this can come from a lot of different aspects. Like the design wise is like very straightforward, the look and feel, like all the nuance, like the animation should be 2 seconds, should be 3 seconds, and what kind of feelings does it create when you say it's 2 versus 3? And like technical wise, also a lot of things about when we were at school, we would choose, I was at least like choosing whichever technology that makes sense for that one single concept that makes sense for my final project. But it is like I noticed, it's like when you actually want to bring this into a real product or something for a company, like a lot of things needs to come into consideration, like platform, like device compatibility, like platform compatibility, and then all the different kind of like screen sizes or like the if you're doing projection mapping, and then all those like fine tuning. Like the first one, I was just trying to align the window to the actual window, and then so there are a lot of like a polishment kind of things you need to work on. And then the complexity is a different thing. There are a lot of like business complexity that I never realized it was real. And then, for example, if you're like back to that years, we were doing like ART, like those kind of simple mobile AR experiences a lot. So you would naturally think about if you have like, I was working at Volvo, for example. So if we're saying that we want to bring a 3D car model for the customer to see before they actually purchase it, it's very standard as a prototype. I was thinking, yeah, the standard interaction for you to have some sort of extreme touch interaction that you could zoom in and zoom out to scale that 3D object. But it's not until later we bring it to the real customer for testing that we realize that they're going to be saying, why do I want to see a miniature toy size car? It doesn't make any sense for me. I'm going to buy a real car, and then seeing the toy size car doesn't really bring much value. And then that's like this kind of like a business logic, and then the actual user scenario in use case that you start to think about, okay, maybe this doesn't make sense. Or if this technology ever makes sense, what would be the actual application scenario for you to use it? So there are a lot of like those kind of moments. And also the complexity from the tech side was also real. If you work for a real company in the Korea, in the industry, for example, same as Volvo is like, if you think about the car, the 3D model of the car is very complicated from the data wise. Like all the pieces inside the car is going to be a sub-level branches, kind of like sub-level meshes and like textures. So those kind of like tech challenges that tied specifically to that business, to the company legacy or the scenarios we're trying to solve are real. I was just never think it was real. It's just like, I was just thinking when I was school, it's like, I'm just gonna make this looks super cool. So it's never like that later. That's what I was struggling. And the third part is, it's quite a shock. The first couple of years, like when I was like first, at least 1 year when I was in the industry, it's just like, I realized how bad I was as a coder. I always think I'm really good at coding when I was at school, but later is what I realized is that there is a huge gap between I know how to code, I can put together my personal concepts to a whichever platform or with whichever library I want to use. But in reality, there's a standard in the industry. There are a lot of more things you need to consider, not only to bring it to life as a demo, but I guess like this is also varies based on your career journey, what kind of roles where you're at. So, but anyway, like for me, those are like just one thing, like my code structure, the efficiency of my code and the architecture and performance, a lot of things I was just thinking about. And then it was just quite a struggling time. And then I would say I literally like every day I was just learning how to code again in a more different and professional way. And then the fourth one is absolutely different process and project management versus the things you're doing in school as a solo developer, creator, students like that. So it's kind of like this graph. This is like one of my favorite graph. I also like show this graph a lot when I was teaching at school. I think it's very likely for us to always stuck at the highest kind of like the peak level. Is I feel, yeah, I manage, I know everything, but I feel like at the beginning of those 2 years, is like realize that there are a lot more, which is struggling. But on the other hand, it was interesting for me because I got a little bit tired toward the end of my school life, thinking about, okay, I've now seen a lot of these things. So what's the new things going to get me excited again? And then not until you deep dive into all of this in the industry, you will realize that there is still so much more things. And then I could feel like experiment, explore, and try to bring things to life. So that's this part. Reflective ways, knowledge suggestion, those are only the things that work for me as in new grad, like early stage in the career life, what I think really worked for me. I think the first one is the most important, and I personally think the most important and found it really helpful for me. And then that also set up the foundation for my future success as a more like senior kind of people in the industry is really focus on those 2 years, like try to develop my expertise in a focused area. And then in my case, I was trying to be really good as a prototyper and creative coder or creative technologist. And then so that really helped me to kind of like feet on the ground. I know what I'm doing. I have that foundation level, and then I could scale from there. And then try really hard to be an expert, to be really good in that one thing which you would call as your expertise. That really worked for me. It could be design, it could be UI UX experience, animation, or like technical arts. But for me, it was that creative developer kind of like expertise that really helped me sort of like all the things come in the later time. And then the second thing is also very important is standardize your workflow and process. And what tool do you use to do a certain things? What's the industry standard? Like what do people actually, other people in the industry would use? I know at least when I was at BT, there are so many things we do. And then sometimes we use a lot of like open source library, like any kind of like tools we could found online or like from the community to put together that concept. But the thing is that when you're actually in a career world, like I think standardize the workflow and the process, the tool that you use, and you start to build up that pipeline that work for yourself and also for the career world is really important because that also to the first point is like polishment of the work really requires you to have like stabilized environment for to develop things. And then third one is just keep learning new tools. I still do that today. It's very important. This industry grows really, really fast. And then every day there's like new things pop up. Just keep learning it as you're doing in DT. That really helped for me. And then polish, polish, polish. And then the final one is more like a personal sharing. I feel like during that whole time, I'm right now kind of glad that I stayed humble and honest to myself. It's like there are things that I don't know. I of course panic at the beginning, but it's like later it's like it's fine. If you don't know it, go learn it. And then respect the complexity of things and don't take them for granted. But just be honest to yourself. And then but don't make it too hard. I probably made it too hard for myself. But anyway, my suggestion right now is don't make it too hard. People would have that expectation that you are a new grad. So they're investing in your potential, in your future, and they know for sure that there are certain things that you haven't thought about, you don't know when you're at school. So those are that part. And then the third part of my journey is quite an interesting one. It's where I moved back to China for a product, like a team that I'm really interested. So that was the time, it's like after working as a prototyper for a couple years, and I started to feel that two things that hit my mind. The first one is like I later when I was at Volvo, around the later time when I was at Volvo, as more of like a kind of like I was more performing as a UX and prototyper lead, and then which I got a lot of chances to see the business side of the world. So I was participating in a lot of meetings about why do we need to do this? What's the business value for doing this? And then how are we going to be thinking about the analytic strategies and how do we do all these kinds of launch strategies? So one thing I realized is that I started to found the business side kind of information a bit interesting because in a company, you will gradually realize that business decision is critical, and then that's going to affect the design solution, design strategy, and also like a lot of like technical decisions. So that's one thing I was like actively thinking about. Another thing is that working in this industry for like I'd say like 1 to 2 to 3 years, I feel that I've always worked in the application layer, means that there's another company having the new technology ready in a certain level, and you apply that technology to solve a application level vertical kind of like industry problem. For example, Volvo is a car company, and the studio you work for art creation. And then so it's always on the application level. That was a moment when I feel that if I really want to be even better doing this, I may want to go to a platform each company and to dive even deeper into the new technology side. So all in all, and then that's when I got a chance and opportunity. I got an offer from TikTok, and then to join the TikTok AR and EFAB and the AI team. So that's how I started and took the accepted the offer, moved back to China for 2 years, and then was working as more of a product lead. So it's not only for prototype, it's like really about how to see things in a bigger structure. So this was one of the products that is like right now publicly launched already that I was leading. I was there like managing a team of product manager and designer and prototyper. And then so we could actually get this thing out. So a lot of people may be using the TikTok era effects. And then so this is essentially a tool and creator platform that called Effect House, which what we're doing is we're wrapping all the underlying technologies that we've been developed at ByteDance and TikTok, and then having an interface very similar to Spark AR and Lens Studio, and then we wrap them together. So the external creator, designer, artist, and creative developer, they could actually create the same kind of like effects. So this was a very, very exciting and interesting project to me personally, not because it's like I really get to see, not only because of it, I really get to work on something I'm personally interested in. It was also a chance for me to see how complicated, if you want to really do such a big scale product and you want to successfully launch something like this, how complicated it is and it could be. So I'm just like listing out like all the core modules that you need to think about when you're like putting together a product like this. It's never that one sort of like interface design thing. There are a lot of things tied together when you want to make a real product out of it. So everything, of course, starts from that intuitive desktop 3D workstation that user can actually use like Unity, Unreal, or something. And then so each of the components and the game objects and the whole window setup, like the whole flow there. And then also like there's like the visual scripting system. So for you to write code without writing any lines of code. And then the hard part comes from like one part is that like all the underlying technologies that the company has been building for years, you now need to figure out a way to connect them together and then represent and display them in a way that external people would understand. So there are a lot of kind of like alignment process resources and decision-making kind of like things need to go in there. What technology do we launch? Do we want to launch at the beginning? What technology shall we launch at the beginning? For example, there are a lot of things that gets to the point that you're thinking that, okay, why would a creative developer wants to create an effect for TikTok? And then you will start to think about it, like, okay, they perhaps want to build up their portfolio, and then they perhaps want to make money out of it. They perhaps want to just be able to connect it to a small brand so they could actually get some gigs happening. And then the next thing you're going to be thinking about is that, okay, if that's what the creator, our user wants to achieve, and then how do we help them to achieve that? And you will naturally start to think about is that what kind of AR effects is actually popular on TikTok as a platform? Because all the things starts like connects together. So this whole story is completed. And then you need to work it like reversely. In the reverse way, it's like those are the things content is going to be successful on TikTok. And then so what features, what core fundamental technologies do we need to embed and to insert into the piece of workstation so people can actually use it? And then in this case, and then how shall we design the flow so it's easy to create? And then what kind of like learning materials do we need to prep? So there are a lot of like complexities, and just imagine it's not only the business thinking, it's also like how many people you need to coordinate together. And then you may think like this is more of like manager or like leadership level things, but for each individuals on the team, like those are the people you need to work with. Like those are all the teams. Even I just want to design a feature, a workflow in this tools. I need to think about the whole thing. Like everything needs to come in together, and then so this thing would make sense. So that's what I'm saying. It's an ecosystem. So this thing is not only about making a tool so other people could use. This has a business value behind, and that has implications for every decision making that you do. It is a workstation and tooling together with a platform for creators, so they could build content that will be successful on TikTok as a short video platform. which in return is going to help them to be successful. So it's kind of like a looping ecosystem thing. Like this is just like one screenshot I'm getting from one the community manager's LinkedIn. I haven't told him about, but it's just like, this is like after you launch a layer effect as a creator, those are the data you're going to see. Those are the things you care about. How many posts has been supported by this area effect you're creating? How many people has been using it? And then how many people have seen the video that you create? How many people have seen the video was recorded with the area effect you're creating? So when you build a product in a company like this for ecosystem or like for developers and creators, it's not only about making that tool really great, it's also like set up for their career success somehow. So it becomes like a really big perspective of looking at something you feel it's more straightforward. So reflection to me, I think still the first one, you're gonna hear me saying that a lot. Your solid expertise is the foundation for everything else you do. If I don't know how to create an effect, if I don't know what content people want to see, and then there will no stories coming from this side. It's just like you have to be really good knowing what you're doing, and then you need to be really good at understanding the things we're talking about. And then the second part is understanding the business will bring a greater impact. I used to hate this so much. I still remember when I was a DT, I signed up for a elective course called something entrepreneurship. I failed so hard. I got a B minus, not even B. I got a B minus from that course. But it's like later, eventually, you'll realize that you need to think about all of those. And then that's only going to make your design strategy more efficient. And when you make certain decisions, you will know better, why did I make that decision? And then why did I choose to use this piece of technology? And then there's always a reason why behind, especially when you're working in an industry. Yeah. And the third one is really collaboration. Collaboration, cross-functional collaboration could be really hard as the company gets bigger. And then this is also a thing, it's just like working with others is hard, but working with yourself during that process of understanding who you are when working with others is really hard. There are a lot of nuance there, we could talk about perhaps in Q&A, but it's like this takes time to learn and adapt, and it is part of something when working in a corporation like this. Yeah. And then the fourth part is more of like a personal thinking. It's like I feel like strategic skills and leadership skills is not the same as cultivating a craft, being good at crafting, or like being good at one kind of hands-on expertise. That takes time. And then I feel all the things here, I would appreciate if I started to do this kind of things in the earlier days in my career, versus sort of like when I have a product like this, I need to build, I start to think of this. So all of those kind of things, to me, I feel there are a lot of things I could do when I was as a new grad, like, or just join some companies like in an earlier time. It's like, so this is like this whole part. And then, yeah, I was like, I forgot about this. It was just like saying that you need to think about what's the best practices for others to be successful when they use the product. So all in one story. The last part is where I am right now. I cannot talk much about the details what I'm doing right now with my current company, but I would like to share high level wise what I'm feeling right now. I'm currently working at Meta on some sort of the next generation hardware product, and also the whole initiatives about digital representation. Like you've seen the Meta's cartoonish style, like Avatar. You probably heard of the product called Codec Avatar, like how to actually bring digital presence in AR, or like in the next generation of AR hardware platform. So those like a high level way. And then my current reflection standing at this point of time are two, like if I think about it from my career journey perspective, I think the first one, what I really realized is that the productization of new technology is very challenging. It is a very lengthy process. Creating a demo may be easy, but making it really accessible to everyone on a consumer level is extremely hard. And then 6 years ago, I was on D12, Kyle bringing in the HoloLens, the first ever HoloLens on D12, Q4. And then I borrowed the HoloLens, and then I was able to run some sort of like Unity kind of things, like generative mesh growing on your wall, that kind of demo. 6 years ago, I was doing that. And then that was the time I'm like, yeah, this is gonna work. But however, when I'm right now really working on products that more of like a futuristic thinking, something like that, I realized that making it accessible to everyone and then not for some creative developers who knows how to use Unity, who get the things like real quick, is extremely hard. And then the second reflections I've been thinking about as I'm doing the stack is I realized this industry has matured a lot in the past 6 years. When I was graduating, we don't have any sort of like standardized career path. I didn't even have a role. I didn't have a title. I struggled for many years. I would like say I was at least like 3-4 years. Like, who am I in this industry? And then it takes me forever to explain who I was to everyone. Like every time, like when I go to a company, I was saying like this is what I do, and then I struggle with like defining myself in any other kind of ways. And then I struggle with like, oh, should I be a software engineer? Should I just do UI UX design? Because I feel like I fit nowhere. That was like how I was feeling 6 years ago. But however, I feel like that has changed significantly during the 6 years of time. You may still be struggling. It definitely is not as well established as standard UI UX designer or like software engineer, like those kind of tracks, but it's much better. You start to see like the big companies has very clear kind of like team structures working on this kind of like new technology or new products. You have like titles that prototyper is absolutely a title right now, and then product design for sure. And then also you would have like technical artists, like those were like very kind of clear career path, and then letters free to actually build on top of it. And the second thing is like creation tools and development kits are much more stable. Like Effect House may be a good example. When I was trying to do base expression or like the OpenCV based kind of like base tracking for AR effects on V12, I was using like OpenCV Darafin, and then with open frameworks, that was extremely hard. I didn't think it that way. I thought like that was standard way of doing it. But right now with like all these like mature tools for you to do this kind of things real easily. Like for example, ARKit, you now have like Reality Composer to lower the barrier significantly. So I feel like the whole industry and the environment for us is much more friendly than before. And then like the market has been educated and the market fit has been quite clear. There's like AR and VR community everywhere, and the industry is heading somewhere. So all in all, I just can feel it. I can feel how much mature the industry is compared to 6 years ago. So that's pretty much everything. This shall be my last slide. Okay, so that's everything, and then hope it's somehow helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning, CT is a gigantic program. Everyone has different ways of approaching that program, and then the career journey later. And this is just happened to be my kind of stories in the past 6 years. Yeah.
Thanks,
hand the
Qinzi.
microphone back to Sven. Cool. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks so much. You've covered a lot, and there are already a couple of really good questions here. So I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to trust that someone gets some questions to us from the room where some more students are sitting. But the first three questions that have been asked here in the chat are actually enough for you to talk for another 2 or 3 hours. So I'm going to try to consolidate them. And one of the really interesting things, Qinzi, about what you've talked about is the variety of things that you've managed to do over the time since you got out. And I think you do a pretty good job of reflecting upon that, the idea that you went out. I remember having conversations with you 5 years ago where you were talking about the importance of coding. And you would say, you know, it's much harder than people think. It's much more important than they think, and you have to really be able to do it. And you've always pushed really hard on this. But then 2 or 3 years later, you were really getting into this whole notion of project management, how you had thought that was really the kicker. It was much more important. And it wasn't that you weren't doing coding anymore, but it's been very interesting to see how you've evolved and also covered a lot of different ground. I'm going to start with the first question that got asked here. You're at Meta now. Marquise asks, what do you think you'll do next? I mean, especially when Meta is slated to collapse in 2 or 3 months, you know? I'm just joking. We want you to have a job. We want you to have a job. But what you think you'll stick stick with this kind of large scale project implementation and management for a while?
To me, personally speaking, I really like the project I'm working on. I feel that opportunity of really bringing a lot of like the technologies I'm personally very interested in and then bring it to life. So I'm very passionate about this. But to this question, I think is that if I'm not here anymore, what would be my next choice? I think if I'm not going to be here anymore, my next choice is going to be start a company, doing some things on my own. I think startup or like a game studio on myself, that may be my next one to go with. I've never.
Okay, so I'm
been-
gonna go right into the second question from Julie, who asks what you think will be the most important technologies during the next 10 years.
Well, I would say I always feel the next era of technology, the next era in the tech industry is going to be a combination of AR and AI. I always think it that way, and I'm still thinking that way. I think AR is the platform to surface information and for people to interact with information in an in an unseen, like in a way that has been never seen before. So it's like the way how you interact with technology, how you access technology, and then so those kind of things. But to me, AR is a platform and AI is the content. We're all looking at the ChatGPT and Midjourney and DALL-E thing this years, and then new type of like content that's more personalized, and then which is also something is like smart content plus a smart platform is where I see going forward. I've seen this like about Web3. I personally don't have much experience with Web3 and the infrastructure level of things, but I foresee if we're going to change dramatically on the surface side, and then perhaps like the infrastructure and the whole connection of the data is going to be different somehow. Yeah, for me, my personal passion is always on AR as the platform, AI as the content. Together, what can we do with it?
Okay, now I'm gonna reveal. I mean, this is a big reveal here about Qinzi, which she can remember this, but I got a back channel question here, which was the question was, did Qinzi major in computer science as an undergrad? And the answer is no, absolutely not. And I want to say this because Qinzi, as you talk about this stuff, you know, I think a lot of people will listen and they'll think you've been doing it forever, but Qinzi had a good design sense when she applied for DT, but she was really, in reality, neither a designer or a technologist. So she has gone through an awful lot, starting with her entry into DT. But I want to make that clear because sometimes people assume that people have engineering or computer science backgrounds. And Qinzi, what was your major? Actually, it was a pretty important major, but wasn't it English?
Yeah, it was. It was English and literature, and I have no idea about anything literature anymore nowadays. Yeah,
Well, you've given all that up.
pretty much.
Uh,
I'm speaking English at the point of time.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
we're getting a bunch of good questions here. Ling Yi, who has a past as a professional ping pong player, which is true. This is true. We have all types in DT. I'll read the question. It seems like most tech companies have little head count for new grads like this. We're going to have to read between the lines what he's saying. Any suggestions for us as students searching for a job in the XR area this year?
Okay.
I'm not sure he's actually asking you whether you're hiring, Qinzi, but
Okay. First of all, this is true. And then I think everyone knows it. Starting from last year, this year, like the whole industry is quite hard. And then so I don't have any practical suggestions for job hunting because I was pretty bad at it when I was a new grad. And I was the kind of person who never realized that I need to apply to the job before I graduated. That was a completely different story. So for this year, I would suggest personalized job hunting wise, I think the most important thing to me is that don't take it personally. If you get rejected, it's not but the most of the time, it's not because of you. There are a lot of reasons you could get rejected. It's not because that you're not good enough, for the job. It could be a lot of various reasons. It could be like that HR just doesn't know enough about this expertise. It could be a reason that that team is looking for a specific skill set that you happen to just not having that skill set. And it could be like things like this. This whole industry is just cutting headcounts this year. So the first thing I would say is just like, don't take it personally. It's really not you. It's really not you. Trust me, I've hired people. It's really not you. Okay, and then practical wise, I would say I was an international student, so I had the visa issue. So I think like another suggestion would be prioritize what's important for you. What is it, the visa? Is the job opportunity? Every of us would have different answers to that. Prioritize what's important to you and adapt the other things to that thing which is most important to you. Yeah, I would say those are two things. Yeah.
Qinzi, I'm gonna one of the interesting things about your path is, and actually I was gonna relate that one of the moments I've seen Qinzi most angry, she'll remember this, but was when she had this was not what it was probably at 2 years after you graduated, you had a job lined up to go work at BMW in California.
Yeah,
Like
that
it was like it was like at their new technologies lab or something. And at the last minute, for some completely idiotic reason, the job fell through. You were so angry, but as I recall, it didn't take you that long to get the job at Volvo. So that was your automobile phase. I don't know how that happened, but the only reason I mention it here is because it's really easy to look at someone coming from Qinzi's perspective and just assume that they have always just had things go their way. And as I say, I've never seen Qinzi more angry than when that BMW job fell through. We all felt so bad for you. But anyway, let me go back. I'm going to ask or ask a question that Barsha asks, which I think is a really good practical question, and it maybe gives us all some picture of how you're working on an everyday basis. And what she asks is, even though it may depend on the projects, what are your most used softwares, except for Unity and Unreal Engine? She says, I think she's assuming you're doing work with those things. But what kind of tools are you using?
Too bad, I use Unity. Okay, Unity is my favorite. Okay, and then on addition to Unity, 3D modeling wise, Blender is what I would recommend. In big companies, well, TikTok it was like more Maya, but however, I personally found if you're gonna learn 3D modeling from scratch or something, I would recommend Blender. It's free. It has a gigantic open source community, and then there are a lot of plugins nowadays, like new technologies. The other kind of new tech companies love to play with Blender. So I would recommend Blender, Unity, and then if you design-wise, the standardized tool right now is Figma. So I would say those three things are what I use for most of my time nowadays. Yeah.
Well, so Barsha asked a second question, which I think is really interesting, and that is, do you need to create 3D models as a product designer today?
It depends on the company, the setup, and the team structure. And then for Meta, there are dedicated technical artists and then asset creator or artists who could do that. So product designer roles at Meta are more on shaping the product, figuring out the experience and what matters for user to use it and the business side of things. And then, but however, if you work in a smaller scale or like small scale studios, or it could just be startup, there may be a chance that you're going to be the only designer in the company. I've had that kind of experience before. I was pretty much all in one, Unity developer, designer, and modeler all in one. So it really depends on the company structure and the team structure. Yeah.
Okay, it's my turn to ask a question.
One thing to
Okay.
add on top of it, I would recommend if you want to do AR, VR, and Unity kind of things, learn 3D modeling. You don't need to be an expert, but understanding the workflow is going to be extremely helpful. First, help you to understand that area, like from a more, as I was saying, be an expert, that kind of expert, like that kind of aspects. Another thing is that it's going to be easier for you to collaborate with other people. And then, so that's going to be helpful. Mhm.
Okay, so to my question, and this is whether or not you can really answer this is up to you, but one of the fascinating things that your recent career path represents to me is a little bit of the playoff between big tech in the West and in China. And you
Mhm.
have done something very interesting. You were working at startups around New York when you first got out. You went to a few places, as I recall. You went out to California, worked for Volvo for a while. And then you made a very interesting call to go over to ByteDance and TikTok. I think you got a very interesting offer and you stayed there for a bit. But then you made a decision, in a sense, to head back to the West, not maybe fully back to the United States, but you're in London now, where you seem to be planning to stay for a while. Can you talk, and I'm not looking for sort of approval or disapproval, but can you talk a little bit about the difference in working in a big tech company in the West versus in China? Or maybe even tell us if you don't see that much difference.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I've been reflecting on that question a lot. If you asked me last year, I may have a different answer saying it's completely different. But as I've been thinking about this more, I think fundamentally it's the same. It's just strategic wise. When I was working in China, there are two things I noticed like very different between the West and China. Is that first one is uh, it's more obvious in China that everything is more business driven. So everything you do, even when I was like in a more sort of like innovation driven and more like tech driven, like new technology driven department, everything needs to eventually get to that business number on the report. How many people, for example, how many people have been using this ARE fab? How many ARE fabs have leveraged this new piece of technology? It's very obvious. And then it's very clear that everything needs to, within a relatively short timeline, to turn into a business value. However, it's challenging, especially for new technology, as I was showing in my deck at the end, is that it's sometimes really hard. It takes time for a new technology to be called fully productized. And then, so that's like one thing. Versus here at Meta, what I noticed is that first, I think like Meta is absolutely a company love to invest in like new technology, has more faith in it. And then that may be like strategic wise, changing a lot of like more kind of the surface level things is that it still eventually needs to become that business value, but they're treating the process or like the nature of the process that it takes longer period of time for innovation to actually start to make sense on the business side. And then, so it seems that that level of, uh, I wouldn't say tolerance, but I don't have any other word in my brain right now. But I would say like it's more like it's better environment for innovation, and then sure like sort of like the expectation for new technology and innovation to become a real product, like that kind of like expectation is more reasonable. And then I would say that's that one thing. It's really like business driven strategy versus innovation and tech driven strategy. Even eventually everything needs to become some sort of like numbers on the business report. Yeah.
If John is still there in the classroom, I'm going to give a shout out and ask if there are any questions live from our group there.
Anybody in here have a question? You'll get to be the last question.
Yeah. No?
Yeah, Smith would like to know if there is a link to your portfolio or any other web presence you might have you are willing to share with us. Yeah.
I don't have a portfolio anymore, unfortunately. I haven't had a portfolio for, I don't know, ever since I became a product manager, I don't have a portfolio anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
That's
Yeah, it sounds very
success
odd.
for
I
you.
know. I know it
Well,
sounds very odd.
So I will close with a brief Qinzi story. And this was the only reason I was asked to be moderator here. So I'll close in this way. When Qinzi was in DT, She was very involved in community. And one thing that she did was she was one of the RAs that helped me with one of our many, many gigantic and completely out of control China trips, which unfortunately haven't happened for a long time because of the pandemic and other things. So at one point we were in Chongqing, and Qinzi said to me, I have to go visit some friends in Chengdu, which was just down the road. And I said, okay, go on ahead, go on ahead. Just come back in a couple of days. So at one point, a day later, I was talking to Qinzi, and she was, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but at some point in the conversation just got cut off. It just ended. I was just on my phone and suddenly Qinzi wasn't there anymore. Now, nothing's wrong with that, but we didn't hear from Qinzi for like 3 days and we were getting worried. We didn't know what had happened to her. And finally, she showed back up to the main group. And I said, Qinzi, where have you been? What is going on? And her response was, oh, I'm really sorry. I dropped my phone in the toilet. So with that, bad things happen to even the most successful people.
I can't believe you still remember that. Oh my God.
And on
That
on
was
that
like
happy
over
On that
one-
note, perfect timing, right, John? Qinzi, thank you.
yes.
Yeah.
Thank you,
anyway.
thank you so much for coming. Come visit when you're next in New York. And
sure.
we love you, and it's great to hear from you.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
Okay.
Qinzi.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye.